The Boston Celtics answer back. They take game 2. I'll go over how they did it, the new X factor in this series, and the advantage that Boston has over Milwaukee, even though it's 1-1. It's all right now on the Locked On Celtics podcast.
Be ever ready. Recognize the city of champs. Boston, baby, we do what you can't. Locked on number 18, Tatum and Brown, J-team, step back. We gon' wet that and slay teams. Of course, the Celtics, who else could it be? Screaming like KG with the Larry O.B. Karalis above average, assessing the team status. Best daily pod, no cap, salary matching. Clutch like Bird the DJ, keep John on replay. Prime time, dapping up the truth on the sideline. Raining J's, how it started, raising banners, how we finished. Locked on Celtics pod, home of the winners. B.
Hey there, welcome back to the Locked On Celtics podcast. Thank you for making this show part of your daily routine, your first listen every single day. This is a Monday through Friday podcast, although during the playoffs here, you will get bonus coverage, bonus podcasts like on Saturday when the Celtics play the Bucks in Game 3. I will be in Milwaukee right there for you, giving you a bonus post-game podcast from Fiserv Forum. I'm John Karalis. I cover the Celtics for Boston Sports Journal. I've written a book called The Boston Celtics All-Time All-Stars, and I was one of the media voters for the Celtics 75th anniversary team. Celtics 109-86 win over the Bucks in Game 2. By the way, today's show is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. Celtics win Game 2. This is a big-time answer. Later on in the third segment, I will get into a couple of the stats, the defensive stats, the advantage that the Celtics have over the Milwaukee Bucks, something that we've seen twice. There's one thing that's happened twice in this series so far, and it's good for Boston. That plus Grant Williams potentially being the new X factor in segment 3. In segment 2, the individual performances, mostly Jaylen Brown. But first, I want to start just with the answer. The answer to the Celtics critics again after Game 1. This is a big deal. So I want to start this segment off with, once again, I do radio hits, I do TV hits, and once again, the big question is, the Celtics coming into this game, what will this tell us about this team? They're going to have to prove themselves. This is a must win, all of that stuff. And yes, it was a must win in the sense that you don't want to go back to Milwaukee down 0-2 because it's going to be very hard to beat the Bucks 4 out of 5 games. It's hard enough to beat them 4 out of 7 games and then 4 out of 6. That's how that's why a series is a series, because now you get to have you get to see who the best team really is. But going down 0-2 would have been damn near impossible, I think, for the Celtics to come back. But they were able to answer the critics. And I think answering the critics is a big deal for this team again. And I think it's a big deal because it's once again Ime Udoka. Ime had one of the best quotes in this game where he said, let me see if I can pull this up. He said after the game, basically, our guys can drive. It's not like there's Wilt Chamberlain's in there. They can drive against this defense and we can attack the rim, which I think is an amazing quote. And I think it's very telling of the type of attitude that this team has. The attitude that they have of, you know what? We respect these guys, but also we're not deferring to these guys. We're not deferential. Yes, those are the defending champs, but they're still a team that has flaws and can be beaten. And the Celtics, a team that have flaws and can be beaten. And one of the things that all of the Milwaukee Bucks fans who have flooded the YouTube comments, which this show is available everywhere podcasts exist, and it's on YouTube. I don't think there's going to be as many Buck fans the YouTube comments this time around. But those after game one, they were feeling themselves. I think there's they were first of all, they were calling me arrogant. And I think they think there's a general Boston arrogance. But the whole point is that the way Ime Udoka approaches this team, they are they're respectful in that they understand these are the champs, but also, we can do some things too. Like, so they came into this game and they were like, yeah, that's great. It's great that you have these shot blockers and you take away the paint, but we still want to go there, and we will. And they did. They were better at it in this one. They did hit 23 pointers, which is the big reason. They were 20 of 43, where Milwaukee was 3 of 18. So when you're scoring 60 points from beyond the arc and they're scoring 9, a 51-point differential, that is going to be a big deal in a 23-point win. But the Celtics scored 18. They made 18 buckets and they made 18 twos. So where they scored 10 points in from 2-point land in the first game, they now scored 18. So it's 36 points the second time around. Points in the paint. Sure, they heavily favored the Milwaukee Bucks, but points in the paint for the Celtics, 24 versus I think it was 10 in the first. So or less in the first game. So the Celtics came out and they answered that. They said, okay, we see what you're trying to do, but we're going to go where we need to go. And they still could have done a better job. The way they attacked offensively, the mid-range shot, Jaylen Brown got going with a couple of mid-range shots early, which got him going, but also softens up that Milwaukee defense. Ime said after the game, we shoot over 30% of our shots from mid-range in the season. We only took 17% from there in game one. So those are open shots. Mid-range shots, I know mid-range is taboo in the NBA, but the mid-range shots are playoff shots. And Chris Paul murders teams with the mid-range shot. The Celtics have not historically been great through mid-range shooting team, but Jaylen shoots really well, and Tatum can shoot well there from there too. I think the mid-range numbers for Tatum are not great, but also they are I think indicative of the old fadeaways and all those the crazy ISO shots that he used to take. I think Tatum basically in this game stepping in to your mid-range shot, catching quick 2 steps, being comfortable, having somebody way off of you. That's a practice 15-footer. Why not take those 17-footers, 18-footers? NBA players, you give a player all that room to shoot an 18-footer. These guys, Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum, they're going to hit like 60, 70% of those shots. So I don't think that it was such a bad thing that they took some of those mid-range shots. It's actually a good thing that they took some of those mid-range shots. They had also the way they responded with the assists and the multiple attacks. That was a big thing. I can think of like 2 or 3 possessions where the ball just swung. And the best part is when it swung and it started with one guy and it ended with that same guy. That is the exact type of play that I've been talking about with this team. The big one, 2 of them at the end of the game. So the Celtics come out and they have this big lead, right? They go up by 25. They shut Giannis down in the first half, 2 of 12 for 5 points in the first half. For me, anytime you can get 2 consecutive bad Giannis quarters, that's a mega win for your defense. I mean, yes, they went out there. He went out there in the second half. He finished with 28 points on 11 of 27 shooting. So that's 9 of 15 after that for 23 points in the second half. Nice big second half for Giannis, but you shut him down in that first half. So that's just great defense. They shut down the shooters. They didn't help as much. They didn't double on Giannis. They didn't help off of shooters one pass away. All of the things that we've been talking about, I was saying, the other people were saying, all of these things that they needed to fix, they fixed. That first half was basically perfect. That first half of basketball from the Celtics was about as perfect as you can expect in a semifinal series against the Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis Antetokounmpo. You cannot ask that team to play better. The way they played, the way they shut down the ancillary players. You look at across the board here: Wesley Matthews 4 points, Grayson Allen 5 points, Pat Connaughton got 13. That was a lot of at the rim, actually. So he wasn't hitting a ton of threes. Only 3 of 18, like I said, for the Milwaukee Bucks. So the defense was great. But then offensively, like I said, the multiple attacks, 2 of them at the end. So after they kind of relaxed in the third quarter, not relaxed, but they got away from what was working. Fourth quarter, the Bucks had cut the 25-point lead all the way down to 12. There's about 4 minutes to go. Tatum drives, kicks to Jaylen in the right corner. Jaylen, a shot that he could have taken, a shot that he would have taken in game 1. He up fakes, he drives. Tatum relocates back to that right corner. Jaylen attacks, draws a bunch, kicks it back to the right corner. And guess what you got? Jayson Tatum, much more wide open. Bang, drills it. Couple minutes later, comes down, same exact play, except it's Derek White in the corner. Kick it over to Derek White. Derek White drives. Derek draws a couple of people because the Bucks collapse around the ball in the paint. No one's going back out to Jayson Tatum. Boom, kick out to the right corner. There's Tatum all alone, wide open three-pointer. Bang, drills it. Give it up. Pass, replace, attack, multiple attacks. So you're not just driving and kicking. That second guy attacks, you relocate, get the ball back. I've said this a million times on this podcast over the course of this season. They got back to it. That got them. You got a Grant Williams 3, and that got the lead back up to 21 with a couple minutes to go. That's the end of the game. So the Celtics end up winning by 23. So after a little bit of a lull, they just get it back to almost their biggest lead of the game when they finish. This is, like I said, third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter, they got away from some things. Milwaukee changed a little bit of how they closed out. They weren't closing out as aggressively. I think they were begging the Celtics to take those one pass 3-pointers. Slick move by Budenholzer to be like, hey, you know what? When you see that guy above the break, don't go flying out at him. Let's kind of contest, but don't go crazy with it. Don't let them go by you. And they kind of lulled the Celtics back into taking some of those one-pass 3-pointers. But they got back to it when they needed to. No game is perfect. You're not going to play 48 perfect minutes. Again, especially against the champs. So first half was perfect. Second half wasn't, but it was good enough. And the Celtics closed the game strong. It's the most important part. Gets down to 12, and it looked like they were collapsing. They closed the game strong. Great response. Great response. Shut a lot of people up on the Bucks side. Let everybody know that even though Milwaukee's the champs, the Celtics definitely belong in this series with them, and they can throw their own punches. And so we've got a series. It's 1-1, and they head back to Milwaukee. Up next, the individual performances, starting with Jaylen Brown. 30-point night for Jaylen Brown, setting the tone once again. That is coming up next. First, I got to talk to you about Built Bar, which is the best tasting protein bar you're ever going to have. I fully believe that because I've had these. I love them. I buy them with my own money. I'm not just sitting here hawking some stuff that's for free. Built Bar and Built Puffs, if you want Built Puff, which is basically a marshmallow infused, protein infused marshmallow covered in chocolate. That sounds delicious. If you're into marshmallowy stuff, that's great. Whatever kind of flavor you like in let's say a candy bar, you have that version of a Built Bar. And they're covered in chocolate, so you're going to feel like you're eating a candy bar. But what you're getting is somewhere around 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, somewhere around 17 grams of protein. That's great for you. That's going to be great if you want it as a meal replacement or a snack, something that's going to get you through the day. Something like I'm going to throw a couple of these in my bag when I travel to Milwaukee, because I know at some point I'm going to be starving and it's going to be a bad choice for me, or a good choice if I get myself a Built Bar. However you want to have them, you can have them. And you can go to built.com, scroll through, figure out the things that you might like. Use the promo code LOCK15. You'll get 15% off your order, and you'll get 15% off every single time. So keep using that promo code. Get a sampler, try a few, figure out what you like, go back, stock up, try a few different things. Every single time you're going to use the promo code LOCK15. It gets you 15% off your order at built.com. Hey, if you're interested in the upcoming draft, you can make Locked On Big Board your second listen after making Locked On Celtics your first listen. Locked On NBA Big Board is hosted by Rafael Barlow, who I worked with on the Locked On NBA draft show last July. That was a great time. Rafael knows. I mean, you want to talk about somebody you can trust with the NBA draft? He's the guy. He's in-person scout. He's not just reading other people's big boards and coming up with his own opinion. He is out there scouting. He was going across Europe, scouting guys. He's in there in the trenches. So check out Locked On NBA Big Board with Rafael Barlow. It's great draft coverage. Wherever podcasts exist, wherever you found Locked On Celtics, you'll find that there too. All right, Celtics beat the Bucks in game 2 by 23, powered at first by Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown came in on a mission. I said this last night or in yesterday's podcast. I wrote it on Boston Sports Journal. I fully expected him to come in energized. Again, I've talked about the reasons why. I know now that he is able to eat and drink and sleep on a normal schedule. That's a very huge help. And beyond that, the focus that he's had, the renewed kind of focus that after a couple of bad games, maybe an up and down series against Brooklyn, he was ready to go. I kind of expected him to come in ready to go, and he plays 38 minutes. He drops 30 points. And this is a typical Jaylen Brown game. The way things go with the Celtics is JB comes in and starts them off. JT comes in afterwards and finishes them off. Jaylen, in the first half, 25 points, 9 of 10 shooting, 5 of 5 from 3. Of course that leveled off in the second half. Of course it did. Tatum was 10 points, 3 of 7 shooting in the first half. But then in the second half, here comes Tatum. He's got 19 in the second half on 54% shooting, 3 of 6 from 3. And Jaylen struggled a little bit, did not hit the threes quite at the same rate. But I think that's because of the adjustment that Milwaukee made. I think he got kind of caught up in the I'm feeling it, which is perfectly understandable. Like, I do think that we have to give these guys like a little bit of leeway here. I will say, obviously me, I'm, I'm not out there in the middle of this game. I'm pushing 50. I'm sitting here in a cable knit cardigan sweater talking about the game. Jaylen Brown is out there trying to beat Wesley Matthews and Giannis Antetokounmpo and, all these guys one-on-one. And I'm just going like, you shouldn't be doing that, sir. In the heat of the moment, a guy who's 5 of 5 in the first half, yeah, I think cutting him a little slack when he feels like he's got open shots, that's I think that's fair. So Jaylen kind of tailed off in the second half, but there was Tatum, and like I said, a couple of the big plays for Tatum were those drive, kick, replace, all of that stuff. But Jaylen coming in and getting himself going with those mid-range shots, I think that just puts a little bug into the Milwaukee defense's mind. Like, Boston is not just going to be let's over dribble and get into trouble and go for layups or threes and nothing in between. I think the Celtics offense has room for that in between, and that in between helped them a lot. So Milwaukee's going to have to be conscious of this. You can't just let Jaylen Brown walk into warm up 18 footers. You can't do that, because he's going to make enough of them at a high enough clip where you're like, okay, if he makes them at a 50-60% clip, then you have to guard that. You have to, and he's capable of that. Tatum is capable of that. Horford is capable of that. Celtics really focused on that, and now you draw Brook Lopez up. On top of that, the Celtics, I got to watch the film again, but it sure looked like they were setting up their actions further up. One of the adjustments I talked about in yesterday's show: don't set your horn set like one of the sets that they like to do with one guy on either side of the free throw line. Set those up at the 3-point line. Well, guess where they were setting those picks? Up at the 3-point line. So they're doing the stuff. I'm going to say it like they're doing the stuff that I said, as if they were listening to me. What in reality is, that was an obvious thing for them to do that I recognize. I can see the obvious things. And it's like, hey, John, you want a cookie? You saw the obvious thing. But that's what I said they should do. They did it. You move the picks further up. There's a little bit more space to operate. Now, when you combine the willingness to take the mid-range shot at a high clip and you move that action further up, guess what happens? Brook Lopez starts creeping up a little further up. You can't just hang back. That drop coverage has to creep further up. And what happened? Well, they went for one alley-oop that he ended up getting fouled on, but Robert Williams was very open. If he wasn't fouled, it would have been an alley-oop. And those plays are there. I bet you when I go through the game film, I can find probably 2 or 3 more opportunities that they had for those alley-oops. So, good adjustments for the Celtics. The Tatum and Brown and Horford willingness to take those mid-range shots and hit those mid-range shots really opens things up for the rest of the team. So obviously the 2 stars stepped up. Horford, I thought, had a pretty good game offensively and defensively. Robert Williams, 10 points, 5 rebounds, 2 blocks. Much more of an impact, but still so far to go. And again, I go back to that Wilt Chamberlain comment that Ime made, which again, just I love the attitude behind that comment. Like, okay, we respect you, but I think there's room for more Robert Williams, and I don't know if it's going to be on those picks. I think there are improvements that can still be made on top of what we're seeing. So we'll get even more Rob moving forward. Grant Williams, who I'll talk more about next, but 21 points, 50% shooting, 6 of 9 from 3. That's just a monster game. Career high, playoffs or regular season for him. Just a huge, gigantic game. Derek White was a plus 22, but he was 0 of 6. And it's funny, before the game, I shot a video of him warming up, and he was hitting all his 3-pointers, and then he misses all of his shots during the game. But he does enough, like in that Tatum play, like he moves the ball. This is a very classic Derek White type of line where, he moves the ball. He does a lot of the right things. He's playing good defense. Okay, so he misses a bunch of shots, but he only took 6 shots. I'm not worried about that. I thought he was okay. Peyton Pritchard, Celtics took advantage of a lot of Javon Carter moments. Javon Carter's not a big dude. And so Peyton Pritchard got to get out there for about 24 minutes. No Marcus Smart in this game. Interestingly enough, Ime after the game says, schematically, we don't lose anything by going with Derek White instead of Marcus Smart because we can still do all the same things. It's kind of like the last series version of the Robert Williams injury, where you could replace Robert Williams against Brooklyn. You could replace Robert Williams with Daniel Tice and still do a lot of the same things. Not exactly the same type of impact on the Milwaukee Bucks, but guard-wise, considering the guards that they have, their strengths are not at their guards. Derek White can do a good job. And schematically, he can just slide right into that Marcus Smart role. And because the Bucks are playing Javon Carter, you give Peyton Pritchard somebody to guard that is not going to roast him. Javon Carter's not going to go past him on a regular basis. He's not going to just simply shoot over the top of him. And yes, Peyton got switched into some disadvantages, but hey, one of them was against Giannis, and Giannis turned the ball over. So that was a big moment for him and on the bench. So overall, I don't think anybody had a bad game. Derek White had a bad shooting game, but I think he had a good game overall. But obviously, Jaylen Brown was the big story. Jayson Tatum closing was the big story. Tatum, 29 points, 8 assists for Tatum. That's just another big performance from him. 3 steals for him, 4 steals for Horford, 2 steals for Jaylen Brown. Great defense all around by the Celtics. But, it's Grant Williams. Grant Williams deserves special mention, and that's coming up right after the break. Why Grant Williams is the new X Factor for the Celtics. Hey, a few people have asked me to join Cameo, so I did. You can find me on Cameo at John Karalis. Search for me if you want to send your friends, your Celtics fan friends, family members, a quick shout out, a birthday mention, whatever it is. If you want a message, a personalized message from me on Cameo for a fan of the Locked On Celtics podcast, Celtics fan, I'm very happy to oblige. Find me on Cameo. It's right under my name, John Karalis. So Grant Williams was Grant Williams has had a great playoffs. Let me just say that Grant Williams has had a great playoffs. I think so far, even in the last game, he was pretty good defensively. But so far, especially, in these 5 wins, Grant has been just phenomenal. The defense that he's playing on Giannis is better than anybody could expect. He is taking him square in the chest, taking those shoulders square in the chest, doing a good job. You can trust him to play Giannis one-on-one. Obviously, I think one of the benefits of having Grant against Giannis is it's tempting to shoot over the top of him. And you want Giannis trying to shoot over the top of people. If he hits a couple of jumpers, fine. I'm not worried about that. He stepped into a 3-pointer and he drilled it. Great. That was 1 of 4. Until Giannis proves that he's going to be a reliable 3-point shooter and a reliable jump shooter, then I'm playing off of him and making him prove it. The only difference, I think, side note, Robert Williams, I think, needs to play way up on Giannis because Rob is playing off of Giannis and kind of daring him, and he's playing a little too far off of him. And Giannis gets like a quick head start, and he's just going through Rob. Like, he's just bigger than Rob. I think Rob should be playing further up. In fact, I think Rob should be way, way up in his airspace, and because he is big and long and quick enough to kind of hang, but I just think Rob needs to play closer. Grant plays at a good distance because he knows he's not going to block a jump shot. He doesn't need to block a jump shot. Strong enough to take that. Giannis is trying to bull his way through to the basket. Grant is strong enough to take it. Boom. And because of that, the Celtics defense was able to hold the Bucks bench to only 1 3-pointer, which is just massive. I mean, obviously they only hit 3, and Holiday did not have a good game. Portis missed a couple. Okay, it's going to happen. Wesley Matthews 0 for 1. Holiday was a big difference maker in game 1. He was 1 of 6. This is going to happen with Drew Holiday. So Holiday is up and down. One game he's going to hit 4 of 6. Next game he's going to have 1 of 6. But it's not just the fact that the Celtics held the Bucks bench to 1 3-pointer. It's that they held them to 5 attempts from 3. The attempts tell a bigger story than just the one make. Grayson Allen 0 for 1. Connaughton 1 for 2. And then really honestly, that's where it should end. I look at the overall bench. Like Serge Ibaka and Luka Vildoza don't count. So really it's 1 for 3. So 3 attempts from the regular rotation bench for the Celtics defense. You're going to win a lot of games by holding the other team's bench, especially in this series, to 3 attempts. Because even if they make all 3, so what? If they were 3 for 3, that's another 6 points. And you don't win by 23, you win by 17. So the Celtics defense did a great job. Now Giannis is going to be Giannis, and he's going to go off, and he did. You can say the officiating allowed him to, and that's fine. People are saying, hey, Stan Van Gundy gets it. I was at the game. I don't know what Stan Van Gundy said. I'll hear what he said. I'll watch the game. You see things on TV that you don't see in the arena and vice versa. So, but here's the thing. So Grant being able to do this is the X factor, I think, to me, because if he can continue to do this, then the Celtics have a great chance of winning. If he can continue to square up in the half court and keep Giannis from getting to where he wants to go, big deal. And that really prevents a lot of the Giannis damage. In fact, you had Giannis spin. You had the one legit, real Giannis spin move, and the Celtics jumped it and he turned it over. Side note, in that moment after the next time out, I swear Marcus Smart was on the sideline. I saw him kind of gesturing. It was like him, Derek White, and Rob. And he obviously, I can't see what he's saying or hear what he's saying, but I can tell just from him saying, he's putting Derek White in front of him and he's mimicking the spin and he's showing Rob to do this. He's telling him when Giannis is doing this, get up there, and he's making the gestures to say, this is why you draw a charge. I'm telling you, Marcus Smart was giving Rob instructions on how to draw the charge on the Giannis spin move. But they got the turnover there. Another 6 turnovers for Giannis Antetokounmpo. Celtics defense, and this is the thing I said at the top of the show, where the Celtics defense, the 2 things that happened that are good for Boston is 2 great defensive performances. Okay? The Bucks had 1 good offensive performance or, good shooting performance and 1 bad one. The Celtics had 1 good one and 1 bad one. The Bucks had 1 good defensive performance and 1 bad one. The Celtics have had 2 good defensive performances. So the one thing that I look at, and this is from Sean Grandy, who, obviously is the radio voice and tweeter supreme of the Boston Celtics. Game 1, this is directly from Sean Grandy's Twitter. Game 1, Milwaukee held Boston to 0.890 points per possession in 87 games. It was Boston's 86th ranked offensive game. Game 2, Boston held Milwaukee to 0.915 points per possession. In 89 games, it was the Bucks' 87th ranked offensive game. Milwaukee has scored 0.959 points per possession in the first 2 games of the series. They averaged 1.143 in the regular season, 3rd in the NBA. For perspective, Oklahoma City finished last year at 1.038. A lot of numbers there. What does it mean? It means that Milwaukee and Boston, like Milwaukee had that one good defensive game. Boston had a great defensive game in game 2, but also combine that with game 1 in the first 2 series, they shaved so many points per possession, and that just kind of reduces everything down to a nice consumable number, to an offense that's worse than Oklahoma City's. Celtics have 2 games now, games 1 and 2, where they've been able to hold Giannis, not shut him down, but hold him somewhat in check. And that's all you need. Without Chris Middleton, you just need to hold Giannis somewhat in check. Again, that first half in this game, game 2, holding him to one complete bad half, basically you're doing your job. Because even when he comes out and scores the way he did in the second half, not enough. Challenge him, because once you get that one bad half, challenge him to be more of a scorer. Make it so he's not dishing the ball. Okay, so if he scores 25 like he did or 23 like he did in the second half, okay, you can say, well, that's a 46-point game. But you've already held him to nothing in the first half, and he's so focused on himself now in the second half that he's not spraying it and getting a ton of assists. Perfect game plan for the Celtics. Not perfect execution. I wouldn't expect perfect execution for an entire semifinal game against the defending champs. But as I wrote on Boston Sports Journal, Milwaukee threw a punch. It wobbled Boston's knees in game 1. Boston threw a punch, wobbled Milwaukee's knees in game 2. They each have haymakers now. They've each won a round. And now we've seen each side kind of show the other one, like, all right, here we go. These two teams are pretty equally matched. And this could go either way. I'm sticking by Celtics in 6 because I think the Celtics just have more talent. And I think Jaylen Brown waking up is going to be a big deal. I expect him to continue playing this way throughout the course of the rest of the series, which changes a lot. Changes certainly a lot from game 1. Question now is, what travels? What travels to Milwaukee for the Celtics? Does Grant Williams in this career game travel to Milwaukee? Does Marcus Smart? Marcus Smart will go. He should play in game 3. Does he get to join the ball movement and all of that in Milwaukee? What role player is going to make the difference? Does Robert Williams, do they get to use him even more? We'll see. My expectation, a split in Milwaukee. That's what I've always expected. I expected game 1, game 2. I expected it to go differently, but I expected a split in Boston. I expect a split in Milwaukee. I expect Boston to win game 5, and then I expect Boston to close it out in game 6. That's been my expectation. I've said it before. I say it again. That's how I think the series is going to go. Even though I thought it was going to be game 1 Boston, game 2 Milwaukee, flip it, doesn't matter. You're going into Milwaukee the same way. So we'll be continuing to cover this here on the Locked On Celtics podcast. Podcast the rest of the week. This is the Wednesday podcast. You get Thursday, Friday podcast, then a special Sunday podcast to cover the post game, and then next week, whole series of podcasts all week long, same old thing. So stick around. Hope you subscribe if you're still listening. Hopefully you will subscribe to the show and get more. I'll have guests all week, and hopefully another crossover with Locked On Bucks to see how we feel after one game, to revisit our conversation. So we'll do that again. And so lots of coverage for you. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Watch the show on YouTube. And if you are subscribed, you can share the podcast, tell your friends, tell everybody. They should be listening to and watching the Locked On Celtics podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.